Hey everyone, Mr. Macintosh here, and if you've got an OpenCore Legacy Patcher unsupported Mac, there's a brand new update waiting for you, 0.5.2. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the changes and fixes in this release, along with giving you a live demo on how to update your app to 0.5.2. Plus, we've got some really important topics to cover, especially if you want to upgrade to macOS Ventura and you see it available in software update. Doing it this way is not supported by the developers. You need to create and download a Ventura installer in the application and upgrade that way. Plus, if you wanted to get smaller software updates in Ventura and used to do the revert root patch trick that is also not supported by the developers, you need to install the full 11 gigabyte update. And finally, if you have a Ventura Mac with an AMD GPU, we're going to talk about the kernel debug kit and the download error that was happening. We got a lot to cover. Let's jump in and get started. First, let's go over some of the fixes in the 0.5.2 update, and then we'll go over the live demo and some of the more important things that we mentioned in the opening here. First of all, this update fixes three major issues. First of all, there were some users getting immediate analysis D kernel panic after a prolonged sleep. That's fixed in this release. Along with, if you had an AMD Polaris GPU, there was display output support problems. So for example, on this here 2016 MacBook Pro that has a Polaris GPU, if you plugged it into a monitor, the screen wouldn't go on the laptop, or there would be other display output issues. The latest version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher fixes that, so the output should work. There was also a issue that I mentioned in the opening around the kernel debug kit for the AMD GPU Macs on Ventura. So let's take a closer look at that. So let's go back to the 2016 MacBook Pro that has that AMD Polaris GPU in it. Now, if you tried to install the root patches after a software update, like let's say you started on 13.0, right? And then you saw 13.0.1 update, you updated to that, but then as soon as it came back up, you got this error, kernel debug kit error, and it could not download. And that was because Apple changed some things on their software server update side and prevented the application from being able to reach out, and you got this error. So you were stuck being on an old version here, and you wouldn't be able to get your root patches installed for graphics acceleration and some other fixes. So you were stuck. Well, 0.5.2 fixes that issue, and it puts in a backup distribution point so that will not happen in the future. Plus, I want to be able to show you how to be able to download it manually. So in the future, if you ever get that error, you can actually go directly to the GitHub from Mocola and the OpenCore Legacy Patcher project and download the KDK directly if there's ever an error in the future. Once you install this, then you can go right install the root patches and everything will be working properly. You won't have any problems. Now, what we found out is that the kernel debug kit should have stayed there, and software update should not have caused any problems, but it did. It actually wiped out some of the parts of the kernel debug kit, and that's why the OpenCore Legacy Patcher app had to re-download it. So it looks like after a software update, because it's damaged and removed some of the pieces after the software update. So that covers the kernel debug kit error and fix on 0.5.2. Now let's go over some of the notes of the 0.5.2 update. Now, Mocola has addressed multiple things here that we need to really go over, especially for 2008 to 2012 Mac Pro users that have upgraded their GPU to a metal compatible card. They're saying, hey, why can't I upgrade to macOS Ventura? I should be ready to go. Well, it revolves all around the AVX 2.0 requirement in the CPU. And unfortunately, the CPUs cannot be upgraded to a compatible version. Those Mac Pros will have to wait until a non-metal version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher is ready for deployment. Now, he mentions here, we appreciate your patience as we work through these issues. Please stay in macOS Monterey until the patcher has been updated and supported for your model. There's also questions on 2011 or older Macs. When is that version going to be ready? Well, there's a note here too. Installing macOS Ventura on an older model like those 2011 and under will likely result lack of graphics acceleration, broken USB 1.1, keyboard, trackpad, Bluetooth, and other. Zero support is offered for these systems at this time. There's plenty of people, even on YouTube and other places, that have said, hey, here's how you do it. There's no use in doing it when you don't have these pieces ready to go, or there could be additional problems with your machine that are not supported by the developers. So hold off. It's still in active development if you have a 2011 and under. There's also been another page created that goes over all of the issues that macOS Ventura has right now. Keep in mind, Ventura is in beta mode and it works very well for a lot of users, but there's some things that don't work yet. And again, that's for a brand new operating system, and Apple has made it harder and harder with each release to make it work on unsupported Macs. So let's take a quick look at that document here, and I'll put this in the comments below. This is a wonderful document that talks about the supported models. It talks about the testing units that are used, and has a really nice list here of known issues. If you see something in here that will break your workflow, do not upgrade to Ventura. Keep in mind, these are being actively worked on now, and look, there's already a nice list of resolved issues that the developers have already fixed. But that's why they put this document here, so you can have a better idea. If you look at this list and none of these are going to bother you, then don't worry about it. You'll be fine like thousands of other people are right now. So that gives you a really nice document here on current support for macOS Ventura, and this will be updated, and over time these will be fixed, or at least a status update will be added to there. Now let's go over some of the changelog fixes here. There's a couple of people reporting that the notification center was crashing if you had an Ivy Bridge or a Haswell GPU. There's a note here that says automatically remove unsupported news widgets on those GPUs, and that it will alleviate the notification center crashing. Plus, there's also a note here that the OpenCore Legacy Patcher application now shows the version number in the header, and that allows for easier identification of the version when reporting issues like it's stuck or there's an error message. So let's take a look at that. You'll see here that now the version is in here. So like if you're in the post-install root patch phase and there's an error in there, you'll be able to see the version number right on that screen to be able to report that. Also, if your Mac goes into a long hibernation mode here, when it came back up from hibernation, it would actually show the OpenCore Boot picker for a minute. That is now hidden in this update. Plus, one thing that we have talked about in the previous version is the OpenCore version number, internal hard drive, that was updated from 0.85 to 0.87. Okay, before we get into some of the important updates here, I want to go through a full walkthrough on how to get your Mac updated to the latest version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher, and then install the latest version of macOS Update, whether you have a Ventura update, a Monterey update, or a Big Sur update. I always make sure I test the version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher with the latest version of macOS Update. So this particular Mac here is a 2014 15-inch MacBook Pro, and let's take a look at the version here. We're running 12.6. So we want to be able to install 12.6.1 to get the latest security updates on our Mac. Now, what do we need to do? I've gotten a lot of questions. Well, wait, I want to install the update. Do I got to install the app first, update all that first? Well, let's go through it from start to finish. Now, what I suggest to do here is first you can, and again, when I talk about the OpenCore version that's on your Mac, we can take a look at that with that command we used in the last video, with the NVRAM command. That shows us what version of OpenCore we are running. We are running the version 0.80. So notice how I said we're running 0.87 in OpenCore Legacy Patcher 0.52. So we could update the OpenCore version. Remember, this is not required in every version, but if you want to stay with the latest version of OpenCore on your internal hard drive, we can take care of that right now. So let's update first the OpenCore Legacy Patcher application to the latest version of OpenCore 0.52. We can see right away that we're on 0.51 and we need to get to 0.52. So that's a really easy way for you to see that you need to install a new version. So let's click on View on GitHub and get the new version downloaded. Now keep in mind, one of the important things to do before you install a software update, whatever update it is to take a quick look at the OpenCore Legacy Patcher update page. If there's any problems with the current version, it's going to be highlighted right here, and I'll use a perfect example. Let's go to the releases page here and then scroll to 0.51. If we scroll down here, we see warning. If you have a Mac with an AMD GPU, note that Apple recently broke our kernel debug kit downloader. Here's the workaround, and that's what we just talked about earlier in the opening here. So that's a perfect way. Like if you see this, you're like, well, wait a minute, let me hold off until a new version is fixed and won't have to deal with any issues. But if we look at 0.52, there's no notes like that, so we should be good to go. And like I said, I always test beforehand. So now we can go to the assets section here and download OpenCore Patcher GUI app zip. I'll give that a second. I'm going to open up the Macintosh hard drive. You can click on Finder or go into hard drive here, and we can open up applications while we're waiting for download. Now, I keep previous versions to do different testing here, but it's always going to be labeled OpenCore Patcher. So when it's finished downloading, it's going to jump up and down here, and we're going to copy it over to our applications, and it's going to overwrite the previous version of the application. But before we do that, we want to make sure we close the previous version first. So we'll go up here and exit. Great, and now it's almost done downloading here. We can click on downloads here and then drag it right over here to our applications folder. And it's gonna say, hey, there's already one there. We're gonna replace it with the latest version. Now we've got the latest version. Let's double click on it to open it. We'll click on open. And now we're on the latest version of 0.52 application. And remember, that's only step one. If we want to be able to update the OpenCore version on your internal hard drive at the latest version, we can go back into settings and make sure that any kind of custom setting that you put in here is selected. For example, I don't show the boot picker, so I unselect that, return back to the main menu, and then I can click build and install OpenCore. We want to install it to disk, and we want to install it to our internal hard drive and the EFI. We're going to type in our administrator password here. Now, before we go, I'm going to click ignore, and I'm going to install the latest version of the root patches. Click on post root patch here, and we can see right away that the available patches for the system are right here, the graphics, NVIDIA Kepler, and we can see that the last time we patched it was on 0.51 on November 22nd. So let's start that root patching and click yes to start as the administrator. Now what this is going to do is that we're going to install all the pieces to the 0.52 update. We installed the app, we updated the version of OpenCore, and we installed the root volume patching. What this is going to do is that we're going to reboot and make sure everything's running okay on the latest version. If it is, now what we need to do is install the 12.6.1 update. We'll give it a second to finish the rebuilding of the kernel cache, and then we'll reboot and make sure everything's okay. There we go. Let's reboot and click restart. Okay, we're back up. Let's log in. All right, we're in. Now let's check the version of OpenCore on our internal hard drive. Click up and look at that. We've updated from 0.80 to OpenCore version 0.87. So that installation upgrade worked great. Now let's go back into the OpenCore Legacy Patcher application and let's check those root volume patches. Let's click on post install root patch and look at that. All patches have been successfully installed. We are good to go. The root volume was last patched on 0.52 on November 25th today. So what we just did here is we upgraded the app, the version of OpenCore, and the post root volume patches, and we verified that the reboot works and everything's fine. If you rebooted and you had trouble or there was some other issue, we can localize it to 0.52 for some reason before we even install the latest version of software update. Now that we know everything's fine, now we can click out of OpenCore Legacy Patcher and we can go into software update and we can check for updates. Two things here. Now, this is very important, right? We talked about this earlier. We cannot upgrade to Ventura, and you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, where's the 12.6.1 update? Well, Apple really wants you to update to Ventura, and they try to force supported users to go this way. And they hide the software update for Big Sur and Monterey around this little My Info button here. It doesn't even turn into a button. It's more like a highlighted text. And look, there's the 12.6.1 update and there's Safari update. So now all we need to do is install now, and it will download Safari and macOS Monterey and install those updates. It'll reboot, come back up, and all we'll need to do is install the post root patches that have been blown away from the software update, and we are fully up to date. So we'll let this install here, and then we'll come back to it when it's ready to go, and I'll show you. Okay, we're back up after installing the 12.6.1 update. Let's log in. Now, once we're on the desktop, what should happen is in the background, the automatic patcher system for the Mac, and there it is. Now, I mentioned this because if this does not come up, you still have to check, because remember, almost all Monterey systems and definitely all Ventura systems need to be patched with the root volume patches after a macOS update. So if you don't see this come up for some reason after installing a macOS update, then you're going to have to go in and fire up the application yourself. All that this does here, and immediately will start to patch the system. macOS updates wipe the root patches during the installs and updates, and they need to be reinstalled. The following patches have been detected for your system. NVIDIA Kepler. Let's click on OK. And then we'll type in our administrator password to relaunch as root. And there goes the root patching. It's done. So let's click on reboot, but before we restart, I wanted to show you, if you don't get that pop-up after a macOS update, go into the OpenCore Patcher and make sure that you need to install the post-volume patches, because remember, the newer versions will tell you if you do or not. So click on the post-install patches, and you should see this. If you didn't see that box before, the patches that you'll need, and all you need to do is click on Start Root Patching. If it says that no patches are required, then you're good to go, and you can click Return to Main Menu and click on Close the Patcher. But since we do, we're going to click on Restart, and once it comes back up, this machine should be good to go. And there we go, we're set. We've got the full suite of application, OpenCore on the hard drive, and the post-volume root patches installed with the latest macOS update, and we're good to go. Now, remember how I told you can double check? You can go back into the application and then click on post-install root patches here, and you can see, look at that, no patches are available and they're already installed and ready to go. And that's how you can double check, and it also tells you when the last root patching was installed with the version number. And that's it. Now, I talked about the macOS Ventura and the AMD GPU needing the kernel debug kit, and I wanted to actually give you a walkthrough of what that will look like if you try to do that. If we want to see that in process, all we need to do is basically break the kernel debug kit somehow. Now, I already did that by going into the kernel debug kit folder here, and you can go into the library developer folder, KDKs, and there's nothing in here. It's gone. I deleted that folder. So what will happen is the application will look to see if the kernel debug kit is there, and if it doesn't find it, it will download it and repair it, or download the latest version that's available. So let's show you that now. Let's click on Install Root Patch, and again, remember, we will only see this if we have a Ventura Mac that has an AMD GPU at this time. So we'll click on Reinstall Root Patches, and we will relaunch as root. We'll type in our password here. And it's going to start immediately downloading. And this is what you should see. You're not going to see this error anymore that came up here about the download error, because it's now able to reach out to the GitHub and get that debug kit, download it, and install it. And I'm going to show you here. We'll have that location open so you can actually see the kernel debug kit be installed here into the library developer folder. And it is about 500 megabytes or so, so it's actually downloading pretty quickly here, so it'll be ready to go in about a second or two. There you go, 100%. Now it's going to install the kernel debug kit and root patch the system. There you go, you can see right here installing the downloaded KDK. This will take a little bit because it has to install all those pieces from that installation package. It finished the installation, and look, here's our KDK folder here, and then we can go into System, and we can see all the pieces inside here. There's all of our pieces. Great. And we'll wait for the kernel cache to finish, and we'll reboot. And that's what you'll see if you have macOS Ventura and you have a Mac with an AMD GPU. We'll click on Reboot here, and it's all set. Now I wanted to talk about the issue where I mentioned in the opening of the video on how we used to use the trick to get smaller software updates. I understand that 11 gigabytes is a large update, right? And it was nice to be able to revert the root patches, because what that does is it reseals the snapshot. And when macOS comes back up and it looks for the software update, if the snapshot is sealed, it will show you the Delta upgrade, which is sometimes as low as 1 or 2 gigabytes in size for the software update. The problem is that the way Ventura is in OpenCore Legacy Patcher, it needs that full 11 gigabyte update to be able to install properly. So we can no longer do the revert root patches to be able to get that small 2 or 3 gigabyte update. If you already did that, don't worry about that. The next update will cover it, or you might not be seeing any issues at all. But you don't want to be the person who does that and then does have an issue because you did it that way. Make sure you install that 11 gigabyte update. The next thing I wanted to talk about is continuity camera. There's a lot of people asking whether the continuity camera will work on unsupported Macs with macOS Ventura. That feature is still under development, but it's not a major issue right now because a lot of the other fixes that I showed you earlier in the video on that list are main priorities. Sure, we would love to be able to see continuity camera work because it's a really cool feature. You can use your iPhone as a camera. If you have a 2016 MacBook Pro, I've tested that and it works, and there's been a couple other models that have been reported working, but anything under that is not working properly right now. Again, another reminder, if you want to be able to upgrade to macOS Ventura, do not do it through software update system preferences. That is not supported by the OpenCore Legacy Patcher developers. If you want to be able to upgrade to macOS Ventura, make sure you go into the OpenCore Legacy Patcher application, click on Create macOS Installer, download Ventura, and create it on a USB drive. Boot to that USB drive. Booting to macOS Recovery, you'll be able to upgrade to macOS Ventura. Do I recommend installing macOS Ventura on your unsupported Mac? This all goes back to a couple of things. Are you relying on this as your main device? I would recommend holding off right now and staying on macOS Monterey because it's reliable and it works so well right now. If you have a test machine and you want to be able to test macOS Ventura, no problem at all. Remember, now that this new page here that gives you updates on the current status, this will give you a better idea of whether you should upgrade or not, or if any of these known issues are important to you. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, a thumbs up or a share, I'd really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, you can click on this Mr. Macintosh icon here to subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Twitter and Mastodon to keep updated with the latest Mac information. And I wanted to really thank all my Patreon members. You guys are absolutely fantastic, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thank you.